You wake up tomorrow, grab your car keys, and drive across the entire country without ever stopping for gas or plugging in to charge. Not once. Not even for 5 minutes. Sounds like something out of a sci-fi movie, right? Well, 2 weeks ago, I would have laughed at anyone making that claim. But then we got our hands on something that made us question everything we thought we knew about energy, physics, and the very future of transportation. What if I told you there's a car out there right now that generates its own power while it drives? No solar panels glued to the roof. No hidden fuel tank. No magical fairy dust. Just pure, self-sustaining energy that keeps flowing and flowing like some kind of automotive perpetual motion machine. Crazy? Maybe. Impossible? That's what we thought too. Until we drove it ourselves for over 4,000 kilometers without touching a single charging cable. Now, before you close this video thinking this is just another clickbait conspiracy theory, stick with me. Because what you're about to hear isn't some garage tinkerer's wild dream or a computer simulation gone wrong. This is documented, verified, witnessed by independent observers, and streamed live to eliminate any chance of trickery. This is the story of how a humble inventor from Zimbabwe might have just solved humanity's biggest transportation problem, and why the entire auto industry is either terrified or desperately trying to get their hands on his creation. Let's rewind for a moment and talk about the elephant in the room with electric vehicles. They're amazing, sure. Clean, quiet, smooth as butter. But there's that one nagging issue that keeps millions of people from making the switch. Range anxiety. That gut-wrenching feeling when your battery percentage starts dropping and you're nowhere near a charging station. Even in developed countries with decent infrastructure, finding a working charger can feel like hunting for a unicorn. And in developing nations? Forget about it. You might as well be driving a very expensive paperweight. But what if that whole problem just disappeared? What if your car could pull energy straight out of thin air, convert it into usable power, and keep your battery topped up forever? That's exactly what Maxwell Chikumbutso claims his modified vehicle can do. Using what he calls radio frequency energy conversion combined with magnetic field harvesting, his car supposedly creates more energy than it uses. The surplus gets stored, creating an endless loop of power generation. When we first heard about this, our BS detectors went off like crazy. We've all seen these claims before, usually from people trying to sell you some miracle device that defies the laws of thermodynamics. But here's the thing. Maxwell wasn't asking for money. He wasn't running a crowdfunding campaign. He was just quietly building these things in his workshop, powering local villages, and avoiding the spotlight. That's what got our attention. If this was a scam, it was the weirdest scam we'd ever seen. So we did what any reasonable person would do. We demanded proof. Not just a quick demo in a parking lot, but a full-scale, no-holds-barred endurance test that would either validate his claims or expose them as fantasy. Maxwell agreed immediately. No hesitation, no excuses, just bring your cameras and let's go. The plan was simple but brutal. We would drive this supposedly self-powered car across every type of terrain we could find. City traffic with constant stopping and starting. Highway cruising at maximum legal speeds. Mountain roads that would make a goat nervous. Desert heat that could fry an egg on the hood. Torrential rain that would test every seal and circuit. If this car could survive all that without ever plugging in, without ever stopping to charge, then maybe, just maybe, we were looking at something revolutionary. We brought in independent observers, people with no stake in the outcome. Engineers, physicists, professional skeptics whose entire job was to find the fraud. We installed GPS trackers, diagnostic computers, thermal cameras, the works. Every single parameter would be monitored and recorded in real time. The data would be live-streamed and archived on blockchain to prevent any tampering. If Maxwell was hiding something, we were going to find it. The morning of the test, we gathered in a busy city center. 4 of us loaded into the car along with camera equipment that probably weighed as much as another person. We had a second, identical electric vehicle following us as a control, a regular EV that would need charging stations like any normal electric car. Both vehicles started with full batteries. The difference? One would stay full, and one wouldn't. The first few hours were nerve-wracking. City driving is brutal on electric vehicles. All that stopping and starting, the air conditioning blasting, the constant acceleration and braking. It's like asking your phone to run 15 apps at once while streaming video. Energy just disappears. But as we watched the battery indicator on Maxwell's car, something weird happened. It didn't move. Not even a single percent. 20 kilometers in, still showing 99%. 30 kilometers, same story. We pulled over, thinking maybe the display was broken. The independent observers checked every system. The battery was fine. The display was accurate. The car had genuinely not lost any charge despite hauling 4 adults and equipment through stop-and-go traffic for over an hour. Meanwhile, our control vehicle was already down to 94%. Nothing dramatic, but exactly what you'd expect from normal city driving. We pressed on, heading for the highway. This would be the real test. Highway speeds demand serious power. The motors have to work constantly to maintain velocity against wind resistance. There's no coasting, no brakes, just pure energy consumption. We set the cruise control to 110 km per hour and settled in for a long ride. Hours passed. The landscape blurred by. The control car's battery steadily dropped. 90%, 85, 80. Right on schedule for a normal EV. But Maxwell's car? Still sitting pretty at 99% like it was mocking the very concept of energy consumption. By the time we hit the 400-kilometer mark, the control car needed its first charging stop. We pulled into a service station, and while they plugged in for a 45-minute rapid charge, we just sat there, engine running, air conditioning blasting, playing music, charging our phones from the USB ports. We were trying everything we could think of to drain that battery. Nothing worked. The observers were starting to look genuinely confused. One of them, a physicist who'd spent his career debunking free energy claims, kept checking and rechecking the diagnostic data. This shouldn't be possible, he muttered, scrolling through power consumption charts that showed the car using energy normally but somehow regenerating it even faster. We decided to push harder. The highway was too easy. We needed something that would really stress the system. So we turned off onto mountain roads, the kind where your ears pop from altitude changes and your transmission begs for mercy. These weren't gentle rolling hills. These were serious inclines that would make any vehicle work over time. In a normal car, you'd watch your fuel gauge drop like a stone. In a regular EV, the battery percentage would tumble with every climb. But Maxwell's car just kept climbing, smooth and steady, like it was driving on flat ground. We engaged sport mode, pushing the motors to their maximum output. The car responded instantly, surging up slopes that had our chase vehicles struggling. Still 99%. As darkness fell, we made a decision. We weren't going to stop. This would be a 24-hour endurance run, drivers rotating in shifts, the car never stopping except for driver changes. We wanted to find the limit, the point where the magic failed and reality kicked back in. We stocked up on supplies, coffee, energy drinks, snacks. The humans needed fuel even if the car didn't. Driving through the night was surreal. Empty highways stretched ahead, lit only by our headlights. Full beam, fog lights, interior lighting, heated seats, everything on maximum draw. The control car had long since given up, needing its second charge before midnight. But our anomaly just kept rolling, kilometer after kilometer, hour after hour, that battery percentage stubbornly refusing to budge. By 3 in the morning, exhaustion was setting in for the crew, but the car seemed as fresh as when we started. The thermal cameras showed the motor compartment maintaining steady temperatures. No overheating, no stress indicators, just calm, consistent operation. It was like the vehicle existed in its own bubble of physics where energy conservation laws took a coffee break. When the sun rose, we'd been driving for over 20 hours straight. 900 kilometers on the odometer and climbing. No charging, no stopping except for driver swaps, no decline in performance. The morning light revealed something else. We weren't alone. Other vehicles had started following us, people who'd been watching the livestream and wanted to see this miracle machine for themselves. We decided to crack open the hood and show everyone what was happening under there. No point in hiding anything. The motor compartment revealed an unusual configuration. Copper coils wrapped in specific patterns, panels that looked like antenna arrays, and components that hummed with a frequency you could feel more than hear. The observers took readings. Electromagnetic activity off the charts, but all within legal limits. No illegal broadcasting, no interference with other vehicles' electronics. One observer pointed to a series of graphene layers. These are acting like supercapacitors, she explained, storing and releasing energy at incredible efficiency. Another noted the magnetic field generators, creating localized fields that seem to interact with the Earth's natural magnetic field. It was like watching a symphony of physics, each component playing its part in an orchestra of energy generation. We pushed past 1,000 kilometers. In any normal electric vehicle, this would require at least 3 or 4 charging sessions. Premium EVs might manage it in 2 if you had access to super-fast chargers and didn't mind waiting. But we hadn't stopped once. The battery still read 99%, occasionally flickering to 98 before climbing back up, like it was breathing. The landscape changed as we drove. Cities gave way to countryside, countryside to desert, desert to wetlands. We deliberately sought out the worst conditions we could find. Scorching afternoon heat that made the asphalt shimmer like water. Dust storms that coated everything in fine grit. Rain so heavy you could barely see 5 meters ahead. The car handled it all without complaint. In one particularly brutal stretch of salt flats, where the reflective surface and heat should have been murder on the battery, we pushed the car to its maximum speed. The motors whined with effort, the cooling fans kicked into overdrive, and for just a moment, we saw the battery drop to 97%. Finally, we thought, we found the limit. But within minutes of returning to normal speeds, it climbed back to 99. The car was healing itself. We decided to get scientific about this. We pulled over and let the forensic team do a complete teardown. Every component was photographed, catalogued, and tested. No hidden batteries, no secret fuel cells, no tricks. Just the configuration we'd seen from the start. The radio frequency receivers were pulling in ambient electromagnetic radiation, the same stuff that's all around us from radio towers, cell phones, and Wi-Fi routers. The magnetic generators were creating additional fields that somehow amplified this effect. One engineer described it like this: imagine if your car had invisible solar panels that worked on radio waves instead of sunlight. Now imagine those panels were so efficient they could power your car and charge your battery at the same time. That's what we're looking at here. We ran an experiment. We wrapped the car in a Faraday cage, blocking all electromagnetic radiation. Within minutes, the battery started dropping. 98, 97, 96. It was still incredibly efficient, but it was finally acting like a normal electric vehicle. We removed the cage, and like magic, the percentage started climbing again. 97, 98, 99. The car was literally drinking energy from the air. By day 3, we'd covered over 2,000 kilometers. The control vehicle had charged 6 times, spending hours plugged in while we just kept driving. We started getting calls from major auto manufacturers. They wanted to see the data. Some offered to buy the technology sight unseen. Others threatened legal action, claiming we were perpetrating a fraud. We ignored them all and kept driving. In a small village where we stopped for food, word had spread about our strange vehicle. People gathered around, touching it like it was some kind of religious artifact. Children pressed their faces against the windows, trying to understand how a car could drive without fuel or charging. An elderly woman asked if it was powered by spirits. In a way, she wasn't wrong. It was powered by invisible forces most of us never think about. We showed them inside, let them sit in the driver's seat, feel the smooth acceleration. One teenager asked if this meant gas stations would disappear. We didn't have an answer for that, but the question hung in the air like a challenge to the entire fossil fuel industry. The weather turned nasty on day 4. A massive storm system rolled in, bringing lightning, hail, and flooding. Any reasonable test would have stopped here, but we were beyond reasonable. We wanted to see if electromagnetic chaos would affect the system. Lightning struck nearby, sending radio frequencies wild. Our tracking equipment had to constantly readjust. But the car? It seemed to love it. The battery actually flickered up to 100% for a moment before settling back to 99. We drove through flooded streets where water came up to the door sills. The waterproofing held perfect. No shorts, no failures, just steady progress through conditions that would have most cars calling for a tow truck. The independent observers were now fully converted. One of them said, "I came here to debunk this. I'm leaving as a believer." By the time we reached the coast on day 5, we'd driven 4,122 kilometers without plugging in once. The battery read 99%. We parked facing the ocean, waves crashing nearby, and just sat in silence for a moment. We'd just witnessed something that textbooks said was impossible. A car that generated its own power, that could theoretically drive forever. But here's where the story gets really interesting. We tracked down Maxwell at his workshop in Zimbabwe, expecting to find some massive research facility backed by mysterious investors. Instead, we found a modest garage in a rural area, surrounded by farmland. Inside, maybe 8 people working with basic tools and equipment that looked like it came from a high school science lab. Maxwell showed us his first prototype. It looked like someone had thrown a bunch of wires and magnets in a box and shaken it. But when he connected it to a simple fan, the blades started spinning. No battery, no plug, just energy pulled from the surrounding air. He laughed at our amazement. "This is simple physics," he said. "We're just using what's already there." His team consisted entirely of local engineers, most self-taught, none with fancy degrees from prestigious universities. They showed us how they calibrated the coils using tuning forks, how they wound the copper by hand, how they tested each component with multimeters that looked older than some team members. It was genius born from necessity, innovation from limitation. The real shock came when Maxwell walked us through the village. House after house had small devices about the size of a microwave oven. Each one powered lights, fans, phone chargers, even small refrigerators. No power lines, no generators, no monthly bills. Families that had never had reliable electricity suddenly had power 24/7. We met a schoolteacher whose classroom was lit by one of these devices. She showed us attendance records. Since the lights were installed, student attendance had jumped 30%. Kids could study after dark. Parents didn't have to choose between buying candles or food. One mother told us her daughter was now top of her class because she could actually see her homework at night. Maxwell took us to a field where he planned to build a production facility. Not a massive factory, but a distributed network of small workshops. Each one would build components that local people could assemble and maintain themselves. He wasn't interested in selling to big corporations. They would patent it, lock it away, or price it so high only the rich could afford it, he said. Energy should be free like air. Then he showed us something that made our jaws drop. In a shipping container, hidden from view, was a 2-seat aircraft. Same copper coils wrapped around its body, same antenna arrays, same magnetic generators. He claimed it had already flown 4 times, all self-powered. He showed us footage on a beaten-up tablet. The aircraft lifting off, hovering, moving forward, all with barely a whisper of sound. No jet engines, no propellers, just electromagnetic propulsion. The car was just the beginning, Maxwell said. Imagine cargo ships that never need refueling. Imagine planes that can fly indefinitely. Imagine homes that generate their own power without any connection to the grid. This isn't just about transportation. It's about freedom. We asked why he hadn't partnered with major companies, why he wasn't trying to get rich from this revolutionary technology. His answer was simple. Money corrupts purpose. The moment this becomes about profit, it stops being about people. He wanted to release the plans openly, let communities build their own devices, create a world where energy poverty was a thing of the past. The independent observers compiled their final report. Every test confirmed the same thing. The car was generating more energy than it consumed. Not by a little, but by a significant margin. The excess was being stored, creating a buffer that kept the battery perpetually charged. It wasn't perpetual motion in the classical sense, it was just incredibly efficient energy harvesting from sources we normally ignore. When we published our findings, the response was immediate and polarizing. Some called it the discovery of the century. Others said we'd been duped by an elaborate hoax. Major news outlets picked up the story. Universities demanded access to the data. Energy companies stayed conspicuously silent. But the most interesting responses came from ordinary people. Thousands of messages from folks tired of high fuel prices, sick of range anxiety, desperate for alternatives. They didn't care about the physics debates or the corporate politics. They just wanted to know one thing. When can we get one? Maxwell's answer was both exciting and frustrating. Soon, but not through traditional channels. He envisioned cooperative ownership, communities pooling resources to build and maintain their own vehicles. No dealerships, no corporate control, just people taking charge of their own energy future. We went back one last time to run a final test. The car had been sitting in a sealed garage for a week. No movement, no maintenance, nothing. We opened the door expecting to find a dead battery. Instead, 99%, just like we left it. We drove another 1,000 kilometers, filmed every second, broadcast it live. No tricks, no edits, just raw footage of an impossible car doing impossible things. The comments sections exploded. Believers and skeptics battled it out with equations and theories. Engineers tried to reverse engineer the technology from our footage. Conspiracy theorists claimed it was all CGI. But more and more people started asking the right questions. What happens to oil companies if this is real? What happens to power companies? What happens to the entire economic system built on energy scarcity? Here's what I think after spending weeks with this technology. Whether you believe it's possible or not, whether you think Maxwell is a genius or a charlatan, one thing is clear. The conversation has started. People are questioning why we accept energy scarcity as inevitable. They're asking why we're still burning fossil fuels when alternatives might exist. They're demanding better, cleaner, more accessible energy solutions. The car sits in that garage right now, battery at 99%, ready to drive another 4,000 kilometers at a moment's notice. It doesn't care about our debates or our skepticism. It just exists, quietly challenging everything we thought we knew about energy and transportation. Maxwell continues working in his humble garage, building devices for local villages, teaching others his methods, spreading his vision of energy independence one community at a time. He's not waiting for permission or validation. He's just doing it, proving that sometimes the biggest revolutions start in the smallest places. So what happens next? Will this technology spread across the globe, ending our dependence on fossil fuels overnight? Will it be suppressed, bought out, or discredited by those with too much to lose? Will it inspire others to pursue similar innovations, creating a wave of energy breakthroughs? I honestly don't know. But I do know this. I drove a car 4,000 kilometers without charging it. I saw homes powered by air. I watched children studying under lights that cost nothing to run. I witnessed something that shouldn't exist but does. And once you've seen that, once you've experienced the impossible becoming possible, you can't go back to accepting limitations that might not actually exist. The future of energy might not be about finding new sources. It might be about recognizing that the source has been all around us all along, invisible, untapped, waiting for someone brave enough or crazy enough to reach out and grab it. Maxwell did. And now that we know it's possible, the question isn't whether this technology will change the world. It's whether the world is ready to change. So I'll leave you with this thought. Every time you plug in your phone, fill up your gas tank, or pay your electricity bill, remember that somewhere in Zimbabwe there's a car that never needs any of that. A car that drives on faith in human ingenuity and the stubborn refusal to accept that things have to be the way they've always been. The revolution isn't coming. It's here. It's just waiting for us to notice. And if you don't believe me, well, the footage speaks for itself. 4,000 kilometers, zero charging, 100% real. You've seen it now. You can't unsee it. The question is, what are you going to do about it? If this opened your eyes to what's possible, if it made you question what else we might be missing, hit that like button and subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to see it. Because the more people who know about this, the harder it becomes to suppress. The future doesn't belong to those who accept limitations. It belongs to those who dare to drive past them. Battery at 99%, destination unlimited.